the man came there with he had a bread wagon and one horse to it. And he come trotting in there with the bread, and it was fresh and it was still hot right from the bakery, and it wasn't all this old sliced up stuff then. The bread was just a big old nice pretty brown loaf, and that was the best light bread you ever, well, besides grandma's light bread, I'll say. There, it was the best light bread you could buy out of a store or anything, and they brought it there to the wagon yard, and we'd be right there when the bread man came, and in the evening, he'd come in the evening there, and Mom would have we'd buy a bunch of that bread, and I remember it cost a nickel. It was awful high then. That light bread would cost a nickel a loaf. Great big old long loaves, and it was all bread, and it didn't have no rat holes in the middle of it, and all that stuff. And it wasn't all sliced up or nothing. Anyhow, it cost a nickel, and we bought some of that every time. Every day we'd buy several loaves of that, and we'd have it for just the whole time. So while I was in the wagon yard, it was kind of inconvenient to do your cooking there, because we always had the old iron kettle, we cooked on the outside to build up a fire and put the kettle over the fire, and we put some fire on top of the kettle and all that, and baked the biscuits and whatever. But in the wagon yard, it's a little inconvenient, so we bought a light bread, and it was all right too, because we had it was good stuff, and we had our cow, and Mom would make a big old pan of gravy, milk gravy, and we didn't put water in it. They made milk gravy and hot light bread, and we had hot light bread and milk gravy, and believe me, that was good. We had lots of milk gravy back in my growing up, and we got along fine there. So after we stayed in the wagon yard a long time, we went back towards Texas, and we went back up to Shamrock, Texas, and then from Shamrock, Texas, for I don't know what reason. For some reason, we went out north from Shamrock. We went through Wheeler, maybe Wheeler's, I believe Wheeler's north of Shamrock. It could be south of Shamrock, but we went out north of, I know it's still farther north of Shamrock, where we went out there, and we had a little bit of work out there, some bowls to pull, some cotton bowls to pull, and we made a little bit of money. It didn't take much to live on then, because we had the cow, and we just had feed, and feed wasn't high. Usually if you stop somewhere, somebody would give you enough feed for your cow or whatever, but I know we bought good feed for it. Anyhow, there's people, I remember this fella had one of them big old trucks like they use in oil fields, with big old tires on it, and him and his wife went somewhere for Christmas. I can remember seeing them take off on their trip, and we stayed there and took care of their stuff. That was one of the things that we got some, I don't know if we got paid for it or we got some use of some of these stuff or whatever. But we watched them take off on their trip. They're going to be gone a few weeks, and so they went off on their trip, and they didn't even have a cab on that big old truck. And him and his family took his family with him, and they took off on their trip. Well, when they come back off of their trip, my stepdad, he had a Model T out there, a Model T truck. It was, I don't know how old it was, but see, this was in 1920. This was back in the spring already now. This, not in the spring, but it was past the first year. So this was 1922, 23. This was in 23. 23, and I don't know what model it was. It was probably about must have been a 21 or 22 Model T truck, and didn't have nothing but a tank on it. Had just a place to sit up there on it. Had a board on top of the tank you sat on it. Didn't have the windshield, but didn't have no cab, no nothing on it. So he had that, and it was in good shape, and my stepdad hit him up for a trade. He wanted to trade him out of that. Now, my stepdad never drove a truck or car or anything in his lifetime. He beans about it, and I didn't either. Well, Grandpa had owned the car before, and I've watched him talk about it and all that. But so when my stepdad finally made a deal with the guy, he traded him our wagon and team and a shotgun for that there truck. So we took off in a few days after that, and we're going to anyway, we took off, and we went to out there, I guess must have been about 30 miles to the first town out there through them hills, and it was sandy places. There was places, I guess, where the sand had blown in or something, and it was pretty thick across there. I mean, there was just two ruts. It was always just two ruts out there until we hit a main road somewhere. 30 miles of just two ruts. Now, my stepdad didn't know enough to kind of slack off on the wheel there and let the wheels follow those ruts. And so when we hit one of those real sandy places, why, he would kill the engine. And when he'd kill the engine, there was an old guy with us that I hadn't mentioned yet. There's some relation to the family there, and probably will mention him more later on. Anyway, his name was Doran, Martin Doran. And so he was with us, and I don't know, I guess he got with us he was probably with the other family there when they left. Anyway, they didn't go out there with us. They went the opposite direction from Childress. I mean, from Shamrock, Texas. They went south and we went north. But anyway, he would crank. Now, he didn't know how to drive the car either, but he knew how to crank. And so my stepdad he would crank, and then my stepdad would start off, and when he'd start off, he would slam that clutch in. You know, you push the clutch in on the Model T to go, instead of pushing in real easy there, and he'd have the wheels cramped. And we straighten the wheels when he's cranking it, and he'd crank it, and he'd only go about 3 feet, and he'd be all nervous, and he was a kind of a nervous type guy anyway, and his eyes would bug out there, and he had big eyes. Oh boy, he would cramp them wheels again, or if he cramped the wheels, the truck would not pull. It would die, and that boy would crank. He was a man. He was a grown man. He was about 30, I guess, and he'd crank until I could even crank it once in a while. I would crank it and see. At that time, I was this was 23. I was 13 years old, and I could crank it too. It cranked easy. I could crank it, so I crank it some. And my stepdad, he'd jump out and crank it once in a while, and then he'd jump back in there and kill it again. And it'd take us for hours to get through one sand bed. And that there man, his right hand was just raw as a beet by the time we got anywhere that day. And it took us, we started early in the morning, and that 30 miles out there, we should have went that 30 miles in at least 1 hour, and we was about 14 hours. It was after dark, I think, before we ever got. I don't even know if we went into town that day and got all the way into town, but every time we come to one of those sand beds, why, we had the same old problem. And I don't know why I would, but I'd beg my stepfather to let me drive it out of that sand bed, and he would not let me drive it out of that sand bed. And so, see, I'd watch them drive. I'd watch my uncle drive, and I'd watch my grandfather drive, and my grandfather's the first one I know of in our neighborhood had a Model T. And so, when I was little there. And so, I knew that if I'd leave that wheel alone, that it would get through a sand bed. As long as there's two ruts there, it couldn't go nowhere else. It'd follow the ruts. But you couldn't tell him anything. And nobody could tell him anything. So he wouldn't let me drive it. I asked him to let me drive it out of the sand bed, and he wouldn't do that. Well, I don't blame him either, because that would have been a slam. If I'd have got it out of the sand bed, he never would have got over it, you know what I mean, because of me only being 13 years old. And anyway, he stayed right in there, and he drove it. He never did really learn much about it, actually. And he was so nervous all the time when he drove it. He was always under a strain. I don't know how he lived as long as he did, and everything went as well with him as it did because of the strain he was under. And so we went on to, finally we got to Childress, Texas, and I don't know how many days it took us. I'm sure that we could have went to Childress, Texas in a wagon and laid our cow quicker than we went in the truck. Anyway, after we got to Childress, Texas, he had a half-brother. Wasn't a half-brother either. It was a step-brother. He had a step-brother living out there in the country, and so we went over there for a while. I don't know how long we stayed there, and we got a job from a fellow across the river, across Salt River there, or Salt Creek, or Salt River, I guess the North Fork of Salt River, they called it. The North Fork of Salt River. And over on the other side of the river, he got a job with a fellow over there, and was a nice old guy, and had a house, and he furnished us a house, and we moved over there. Well, we had to cross that river quite a bit if we go over to visit his brother. We had to cross that river, and there was no bridge. You had to ford it, and there was no water in it. Once in a while, maybe there'd be a little pool somewhere, but the road never went through the water, but it was sandy in the bottom. So there was another problem. There's a problem getting across there. And you'd sure get stuck if you didn't keep straight and keep it going across there, because once you got stopped, boy, it would just bury itself almost. Anyhow, we got the job over there, and then that summer, when summer come, or I don't know if it's the same year or whatever. I guess it was the same year. I don't really know. Anyway, we was doing some cotton chopping out there. I know a little ways from where we was living at, and we went over there and we took the truck. And I remember my stepsister, oldest one, and my sister and me, we were all working there. We were chopping there, and now I wasn't 14 yet, and I was the oldest one. And we were hoeing something, cotton, I guess, getting dirt out or whatever. And we're hoeing along there. I know that one day, this stinging scorpion, not a stinging scorpion, a stinging lizard. No, wait a minute, a centipede, I'll get it right. Centipede, one has all the legs. Well, the centipedes there in Texas, they growed about 6 or 8 inches long, and they was about, their body was about, white as a big man's thumbnail. And then the legs stuck out on each side, and this, we were going along there, and all of a sudden, we were chopping along there, and my stepdad started hollering, and he grabbed his leg. He had gloves on, and he grabbed his leg, he grabbed his britches on his leg about halfway between his crotch and the knee, and he pulled it out away from his leg and started hollering, I got something up my pants leg. Well, it was funny. It's not funny now, but it was funny then. And of course, the look he had on his face, and the way everything was going, and everybody started laughing. I started laughing. I couldn't do anything. Didn't know what to do, really, actually. And he kept hollering, and he got his belt unbuckled, and the day before, we was chopping with a whole bunch of women folks. I know that day was just our family out there. And he started trying to get his pants off, and he started unbuckling his pants. He started yelling at me to help him pull his pants off. And, well, I was too tickled I couldn't hardly do anything. I didn't know what to do. We didn't know what was the matter with him. And so finally I helped him get his pants off. He never did turn that object loose. And we got that thing off, and it was one of them big old stinging scorpions had climbed up his breeches leg, and he felt it touch him. Its back, I guess, touched him. They tell me that if the legs touch you, it stings, but I don't know about that. But something touched him anyhow. When he grabbed that and he held it, his pants happened to be big old pants, big old overalls. And so he had held it out away from his leg there, and I guess it just never could touch his leg. And I finally come to my senses there and got a hold of his pants and pulled them off, and there was this big old stinging scorpion there, centipede. And it was at least 6 inches long there, and like I said, in size, I guess it must have expanded there close to an inch wide, legs and all on the sides and so forth. Anyway, while we were still working over there, I don't know if it wasn't that day, I know, because he's too upset to let me try to drive, I'm sure. But up there, after a while there, a day, I know one time after that, well, I talked him into letting me drive it. I always wanted to drive. Every time we did anything at all, I'd ask him if I could drive. No way, no, he wouldn't let me drive. So, one day, I talked him into letting me drive home a little ways on the way home, and it was just level ground out there. There wasn't a thing in sight. In fact, there was no fences. There weren't anything. A little old bar ditch there wouldn't have hurt anything if I'd have run off in the bar ditch or went out through the field or anything. It wouldn't have hurt nothing. But I finally talked him into it. He let me get under the wheel, but he wouldn't let me hold the gas pedal. The gas, the lever's up there on the under the steering wheel. There's the lever you pull up and down. Well, he let me hold the wheel and push the clutch in and put it into gear, but he wouldn't let me have a hold to the gas feed. So he just made it idle. He just idled there for a long ways. And I was sitting there, and of course I told you before, at that time it never had a cab on it yet. We had some bows on it when we went somewhere, and we could cover all the bed part up. We could cover up the bed with a wagon sheet there. But the seat was up front. There was no cab on it. So I was just sitting there looking down at the ground, a hold of the wheel, sitting down there looking at the ground, and he said, "Get your head up here and look, see where you're going." And of course, we were only going about 4 or 5 miles an hour, I guess. It was just chugging along, chug. And I was looking down there, and he said, "Get your mind on what you're doing here to see where you're going." He was all excited, and he was holding the gas pedal there and had his hand on the whole thing, make sure it didn't get down too far and all that stuff. And he said, when he said that, he said, "What are you looking down there for?" I said, "Well, I was just looking to see if the wheels were turning." That kind of made him mad, but after that, he let me try it again. I don't remember then. I don't think I lasted much longer that day, but later on, he let me try again at home in the pasture there right next to the house. And he let me drive a little ways, and he let me have a hold of the pedal that time, the gas feed. And I gave it enough gas to get the wheels turning. So after that, after I drove it around the house there a little that one day, he let me drive. From then on, every time we went anywhere, he let me drive. Now, when just me and him going in the truck, he'd always let me drive. It bothered him to drive, made him real nervous, and he could ride with me then, and he never had no problem. Anyhow, I was in 13 at the time when I first started doing this now, and so we went all around there, and he'd let me drive. Well, after, I don't know how long it was, that late in the fall, I guess that fall, this old man, the daddy of that boy that done all the cranking, he kind of got sweet on a gal that had, before that, he had got sweet on a gal that was with a guy that a truck and a outfit. He was camping and moving, and he was going way down by Houston somewhere. And he hooked this old man up, telling him what a grand time it was and how everything was down there and how much better it was than it was out there and whatever. And he talked this old man into going down there. Well, the old man, well, I don't remember too much about it there at that time, but the memory of the rest of it, after we got out of ways, really come around. We went down there. We went with this old man, and I tell you, we got down, where was it? Down around Waco or somewhere there, and we didn't have any money. We had nothing to do, nothing to go on. We finally my stepbud got a job of driving a team there, they was building levees along the river. They're building levees to keep the river from flooding everything, and for levees there to hold the water back and protect the people and whatever. Well, he got a job working on there, and well, he wouldn't have got a job. They didn't have a job for him, but they didn't have no extra teams or anything, but they had one bulky team. They had a team that was bulk, and they couldn't get them to do anything, so my stepfather told him, said, let me try them. Said, I think I can make them work. And so my stepdad, he got them. And he put in a free day out there with that team, just playing around with them, kind of teasing them along, putting a little bit on the scraper and whatever there, and talking to them and petting them and whatever, and letting them know that he wasn't going to hurt them and all that stuff. And he had a kind of way with animals anyhow, and so he talked that team into working. And before the day was over, he had him pulling a scraper full of dirt, and the next day they put him on. And he went to work there, and after he worked there a while, and I know one day there, the people that was right by us, their house burned down, and that was a big thing. And I know the family, the man and the woman, was fighting all the time, but he was working that day. He went back to work. And I don't know if it was an accident or whether she set the fire or not, but I remember trying to chop the hole in the side of the wall to get her sewing machine. She was hollering about her sewing machine. They got the family out okay. And wanted to get her sewing machine, and when they chopped a hole in the wall on the side there to get her sewing machine, the blaze popped out at it. So that was where her sewing machine was sitting, and that was the end of her sewing machine. Anyway, we worked there my stepfather worked there for a while. I say we every once in a while, because I'd go down there and he'd let me drive him a while. I didn't get a job, but I'd go down there and I'd drive him a while, and he'd sit out there in the shade and let me drive him for a while if I wanted to. And that way I'd get to drive and he'd get to rest. So the team worked real good, and somehow or another, I guess I got along with horses too. I always loved horses and whatever. So I enjoyed that, and after a while then we moved on a little farther, and we got a little farther down. We was going down there. This old man was with us, and he was determined to go down where that old man was at, because that old man had a daughter that wasn't married, and he thought, I guess, he'd get her, and so whatever. And we moved on down that way, and we got on down. We went, I don't remember too much from there. We went to College Station, Texas. One incident, though, before we got that job on the thing, I want to drop there a few words. We stopped alongside the road one night. We trying to find a good place to camp. We couldn't find a good place to camp. And finally, we just pulled over beside the road and camped in there. And there's no houses around there or anything, no place to get any water. And the bar ditch there was full of water, and so we got some water, and my mom, she made bread that night, and we fixed our supper, and by campfire, of course, and when we got up the next morning, it was red clay around there, because you couldn't tell very much about it then. In nighttime, it was red clay, and it had recently rained, and that water was red, and them biscuits looked like bloody biscuits that we had left over from the night before. It was kind of funny. Anyhow, but nobody worried about it. Now we didn't worry about it. We didn't know we was poor. We just thought we was having a problem now and then, and the rest of it was all fun. Anyhow, we moved on down, and we got down to I can't remember. I remember a few things, but not worthy of putting in. Anyhow, we got down to College Station, Texas. That's A&M College in Texas at College Station there, down below Waco ways. And so we stopped in there, and we got a job there. My stepdad, if there's anybody had a job, he'd always get one. And maybe it wouldn't pay very good. I don't remember what they paid, but they paid us by the cord for the wood, and we cut it 4 foot long. And I remember that it was anywhere from the size of your arm up to about 6 or 8 inches in diameter. It's land that had been farmed before and had grown up in timber, and up to some of the trees was big around as 6 or 8 inches in diameter at the bottom, and of course they were just straight up there. And we were clearing that off. We were cleaning that off and wicking the wood, and we made them little pins. They were 4 foot long, and the way we had to cord it up, we corded it up, and they paid us by the pin. Somehow or another, now I don't know, but we put, just like laying match stems down, we laid 2 down, we laid 2 across the other way at the ends of them, and we laid 2 the other way, and 2 the other way, and 2 the other way. Make little pig pins out of them, but we made them 4 foot high, and I don't know, the wood was 4 foot long, and that's what they paid us by anyhow. That's how we did them. And so I had a job always doing that, and my sisters, they worked at it some, and we had brush to drag over and put in the pile, and they burned the brush later. We didn't burn the brush. We made a little money, and we worked there for a while, and we got a little money ahead, and we decided then to go on down, farther down. We got, I don't know, 60 or 70 miles down the road, or 100 maybe, to a place, then it was called Dinkins, Texas. I don't know if there is a Dinkins, Texas now, but we got down there. At Dinkins, we run onto an old man there, and I'm not sure we run onto him there. He might have came up to the college and talked with the family. I'm not sure about that. Seems like he did. I'm just somehow or another think he did. And anyhow, we went out there to his place, and he seemed like a nice old guy, but now he really wasn't quite that nice. But they had the cotton already up, and it needed some hoeing done and some cultivating and whatever. And he told us that he'd give us half of the crop, and he would buy our groceries if we would try 2 months. And they had a drought, and the drought was on, and they didn't know if it's going to rain. If it didn't rain, the cotton wasn't going to make anything. And I remember that the cotton hadn't been planted. It had just been worked, because it didn't die in the winter time. They just cut it off, and it came out new in the spring. Now that they never had anything to kill the stalk, and the stalk would grow the second year, or I don't know how many years, but it wasn't planted that year, I know. But anyway, he said if we would work that, he would furnish us groceries if we'd work that crop for 2 months, and of course we just worked for each all the time anyway, and it didn't make a whole bunch of difference how it was gonna work out. But he said that he'd furnish our groceries for 2 months, and we could work it, and if it didn't rain in 2 months, why, then we could just walk away from it and forget it. So we took him up on that, my stepfather did, and we went out there and we went to work. And we worked pretty hard, but it wasn't too bad. And he furnished us a place to live. We had a house to live in. It wasn't too good a house, and we didn't have any furniture or nothing, but we had plenty of stuff to. My mom always had lots of quilts and blankets and whatever. And it's in the summertime anyway. And she was. My stepdad wasn't very good at doing anything or fixing something up, but my mom was right there when it come to fixing things up and making it work. And she'd make it work. Well, anyway, we did fine for that 2 months. We just had a real vacation, and there were some people around there we got acquainted with, and we got acquainted with this one family there. They were Bohemian people, and well, how it started in, I guess, I got acquainted with them real easy, because I got out there one evening, and as soon as we got there, I guess, and I had this piece of a mirror or something, or piece of a looking glass anyway, and I was messing around with it, and this old man, this girl, had a pretty little girl there, about she's about my age, I guess, or a little older. She probably was 14, 15, or something like that. Anyway, something near my age, and of course this was in the next year now already, and I was 14, about 14 years old. So, well, I wasn't quite 14, I guess. That was in the spring yet. I don't remember now, but what time of the year it was. But anyhow, I wasn't 14. I was still 13. Anyhow, I guess she was about 14, and she was a pretty little girl, and I had seen her before, up there, and I kind of liked her anyway. But I was out there, and I was shining this mirror around, and I got to shine it on that old man up there. And then I thought, I didn't know it was doing too much damage. Now I know what it'd be like if some kid shined a light of a mirror in my face, and I was relaxing on my porch. And well, I got acquainted with that old man real easy. He come down there, and our whole family came down, and we had a big ruckus, and the family did. And of course, I got the worst end of it, and all that. But then it come out pretty good, and we got acquainted. And after that, we were real good friends with these people, and everything. I guess my parents made me apologize to him and everything, and I was glad to at that. But anyhow, I really liked the little girl, and we got used to, I got acquainted and everything. But I don't know, something about this old man we didn't like, and he had a wife too, but he was playing around, playing up to this little girl, and it didn't look good to any of us, and so it was quite kind of a mess there. And so by the time our 2 months was up, we were glad to get out of there and leave. Only I hated to leave the little girl, of course, because I really liked her. But I could see that old man had her under his thumb there, because they was tied up with him. They had to do what he said do, and so we had just a 2 months agreement, and we got out of there. And we went on towards Houston, and I don't know anything about the towns or whatever we went through, but I know when we got to Houston, we were supposed to went to Houston. We turned off, and I'm pretty sure that we turned to the left. We went about 35 miles back, kind of into a timbered country in the pine woods. We went into pine woods, I know that. But I don't know, now from looking on the map, it looks like the pine woods would have been north and a little bit east of Houston. But I'm not sure of the location, because it's just the way to get in there, and that's it. And we went in there, and we was there for a day or two, looking around, and we finally, my stepfather and that old man, they got a job sawing saw logs up there in the woods. And I don't remember what they got, but seems to me like they got $1 a day a piece for sawing saw logs. And I fooled around there, and I got a job. And they gave me a job. Now this mill was built up high off the ground. I don't know why this worked out like this or what, but maybe because of water or because of flooding or something. But the mill was up high, and it was about when the logs came out, it was quite a ways up, maybe 8 feet above where the lumber came out, and the lumber would come out of that sawmill and it would drop out there on the ground. And of course, back then now, there was no 2x4s. When a 2x4 was finished, a finished 2x4 was 2 inches thick and 4 inches wide. There's no getting around this old cutting it down smaller or nothing. And all this lumber they was cutting had to go through the kiln. So when they kiln dried it, and then they planed it down to 2 inches and to 4 inch wide and whatever. And if it was big planks, you know, like 2x12s or 2x14s or 2x whatever 16s or something, and they had some big saw logs, and there were some big ones come out of there, and they'd come out like 10 foot long, 12 foot long, or 14 foot long. I don't know how long they came out, but I know that I picked those up. They came out on the ground, and I picked them up, and I took some of those big timbers and put them up onto the dock, where the kilns were. It was about 5 feet off the ground, and it was built, had a big platform. It went all the way down to the kilns, and the dolly was on the top of that. So I put this big heavy timber up on one end, up on the deal, and the other end on the ground. Now when that lumber come out of there, I picked the lumber up and carried it up that, walked up that one, up this big board timber up to the top of the platform there and loaded it onto the dolly. Then somebody else took it from there and put it in the kiln. I don't remember how much of it I done in a day, but I know I worked from the time the sun come up until the sun went down. I had an hour off at noon. And I got 50 cents. They gave me 50 cents. They gave my stepfather and them $1, and they gave me 50. And never in my lifetime, I'm 80 now, but there was never a time in my lifetime that I can ever remember when I could have lifted and carried any piece of lumber like that, say if it was 14 or 16 foot long, and I know they were that long, and 12 to 14 inches wide, and 2 or 2 1/4 thick, or 2 1/2, or whatever they was, but to make, after they kiln dried them and draw them into their smallest size, and then they would plane them down to 2 inches. So I don't know of any time during my lifetime that I could have carried those. But I guess when you have to do something, you have to do it. We had to get out of there. We was down there, and this old man never did find his part he was looking for. He never got to see his gal anymore, no telling where they went to. Anyway, they might have got sidetracked, but we got out of there, and we went back to College Station, and we did the same thing at College Station. We went back and we cut more cordwood, and I remember the foreman out there of the college. He was the foreman of the outside farm, of everything on the outside there, the horses, the cattle, the whole thing. And he was from, I think from Lubbock, Texas. He's up there. I know he was a Texan, and he wore his boots and his Stetson hat and all that stuff. But he was the finest guy that you ever seen. I mean, he was just a swell guy, and though we were always just camping out there, he'd come out in the evening, bring his wife with him, and he was just a young guy, and they hadn't been married too long, and they'd talk, and we'd talk, and we'd have a good time, and he was talking about, one time I remember he was talking about how many pairs of shoes his wife had. She was kind of highfalutin a little bit, but she was nice, she was friendly, and all that, but I guess she was just classy or something. Anyway, she had all these shoes, and then if you heard of anybody having more than 2 pairs of shoes, I mean a pair of work shoes and a Sunday shoe, it was something. But this woman had, she had pairs and pairs and pairs of shoes in different colors and all that, so that was something. He thought that was kind of funny, and he mentioned, I remember him mentioning that one time, but she took it all right, she didn't mind, and so, and we went back up there, and he put us right back on, and they was right back out there to visit us, and we worked there for a long time, and there was an old boy that was farming down there on that farm that we got acquainted with when we stayed on that farm for that 2 months, and his name was Walter, and his last name was Doolittle, Walter Doolittle, and so we got really acquainted with him, and for some reason, when we went back to College Station, after we'd been down to Houston and back, he went up there with us, and he worked with us in those woods for a while. He quit the farm down there too, and he had this horse of his own, and it was the snortiest, meanest kind of a horse I think I ever did see. You couldn't get close to him. And he'd snort and paw at you and everything else. And that old boy could do anything in the world with him, but he wouldn't let a stranger within 10 feet of him at all. And this old boy couldn't talk plain. Walter couldn't talk plain, and he was a nice and real nice guy, but he couldn't talk plain. And he and I, we went out there and we put some poles up on saplings that was already standing. That's where we'd camp kind of in the woods out there, and where we was working, and we'd save this space where we was camped at, and so we got us some saplings there about so far apart, and we put us some poles up there and fastened them onto that, and then we put some poles across that, and then we put our bed on it so we wouldn't be on the ground, because there was copperhead snakes in that area and there, and of course there was lots of leaves, and there were stinging scorpions. I don't know if it was a real dangerous kind, but they'd hurt terribly when they sting you. They weren't the kind of scorpion that would kill you when they stung, but you would get stung now and then. One night we were sleeping, and we were just sleeping real good, and this scorpion got on me and stung me, and boy, I got out of that bed. I jumped off out there, and I was a scratching and a scratching and a scratching, and this old boy, he was laying there. It woke him up, and he was laying there, and he just dying laughing. He couldn't even laugh plain, and he was having a ball. And that stinging scorpion that stung me was still in the bed, and it got right up on his stomach, and it stung him all over. And man, and then it was funny. Only he didn't laugh that part. He wasn't laughing, I was laughing. So anyway, that's enough of that. We got out of there and headed back, and we got back up there. I don't know where we went back to. We might have went back to Paducah, Texas. Seems like we did go back to Paducah, Texas, and work that fall. Yeah, I think we went back to Paducah, Texas that fall and worked in the cotton. We went anywhere, somewhere in Texas. We worked in the cotton that fall, and we went back. I can't remember now from just where we started at. After we got back up there, we went to my Uncle Frank's. That's my grandfather's half-brother. My grandfather Clegg's half-brother, Tom Clegg's half-brother. We went back to Rotan, Texas. Down to Rotan, Texas, and we stayed a couple of weeks there. Grandpa went there on a vacation, and we went with him, and we had lots of fun there with the family and everything. And we went back up there to Texas, Childress, Texas, up in that area, and went to working again. And I remember the fall of 1924. We went to, let's see, was it 24? No, it was 26. I can't put things together in between there, the time we got back up there, but I know we went back to Elk City, Oklahoma, and we pulled in there. And see, this old man that was with us that